thanks, Glenn. I really appreciate the chance to visit with y'all. I got to give a little talk to the avant-gardeners. It seemed to go well, except for the audio-visual problems. So Glenn said, "Do you want a presentation?" I said, no. So we're just going to talk, okay? So again, I've been privileged. I got to work with farmers my whole career, and so it made sense when Glenn asked me to come talk to the farmers. I said, well, this just makes perfect sense. But then he made a mistake. I said, how long do you want me to talk? And he said, as long as you want to. This is a problem. My daughters used to ride with me on occasion, looking at my field research plots at various places. Finally asked one of them, said, what do you think I do? She said, you drive around and talk on the phone. And that's pretty well true, but in the meantime, I did trials over something like 31 states. So many times I've looked up and said, I can't believe they're paying me to do this. So had a great career, retired a year ago, been here about 4 years. So a little bit about me. Agronomists love tools, they love toys. So I've got an infrared thermometer here. We're going to have a little fun with it here in a second. So you can get temperature, I don't know if you can use them. You can get really quick temperatures. Just cutting in and out. Okay. So husbands can make mistakes, as we all know, well-meaning mistakes. So there was one time I pointed this at my lovely wife, thinking to pay her a compliment, and I said, wow, you're smoking hot, and she was having a hot flash at the time. So this is my second infrared thermometer. But they're really useful tools, and so why do we want to use things like tools? For the last 6 years, I used drones. Pretty sophisticated drones that we can fly over cornfields, cotton fields, whatever, and measure a lot of things. Because we're doing exactly what you do in your garden. We're trying to make it as stress-free as possible. So a large part of my talk tonight is going to be about plant stress and how plants react to that stress, and they do it in a pretty cool way. So it didn't work right now because we got cloudy, but this afternoon I borrowed one of my wife's green t-shirts and put it out in the sunshine. Okay. Use my little infrared thermometer here. Air temperature was 92 degrees. So can anyone tell me what that green t-shirt temperature was? Anyone take a guess? Dark green object out in the sunshine. Any guesses? Hot? Okay. It was 110 degrees. Okay, so air temperature was 92, and a dark green object sitting in the sun was 110. Okay, you've all got dark green objects standing in the sun in your gardens. What do you think the leaf temperatures are? If you were to measure it with one of these things. Can anyone take a guess? A green t-shirt, the same color, it's 110. No guesses? Most people guess wrong. They guess dark green object out in the field will be hotter than air temperature, and they're not. They actually run about 4 degrees cooler than air temperature. I suppose you might can tell me why. We cool ourselves by sweating, right? Plants cool themselves with water and transpiration. So your leaves are not 110. They're about 4 degrees cooler, and why is that important? Hey folks, plants are just like us. They have the same temperature bands that we do. If you're uncomfortable at 95, promise you your plants are uncomfortable at 95. So they do everything they can to cool themselves, and water is the main reason they do that. So temperature is just one of the stresses that plants can go through. So what I thought I'd do, there's a great book out there. And by the way, I've got a list of books that I have enjoyed over the years. It's up here. You're welcome to come take a picture after the talk. A lot of my comments tonight are from a book called What the Plant Knows. Okay, it came out about 15 years ago. And it's a summary of all the latest plant physiology findings. And so I wanted to share some of that with you. Plants see, they absolutely see. They smell, okay? They communicate, all right? And they collaborate. About the only, they also remember, about the only thing they don't do that we think about as far as our senses is they can't hear. And there's been lots of studies on that trying to prove that plants hear, and they don't. But they have a lot of senses. So here's an example. If a farmer plants corn, and it's in nice, neat rows, and that corn has grass and weeds that come up with it, okay? And then you've got some corn over here that has no grass and weeds with it. Which corn is going to get taller? And most people would guess correctly that the corn with the weeds in it will get taller because it wants to compete. It has to get higher to get light. How does it know? How does a corn plant or any plant know that there's green weeds underneath it? So University of Guelph, some of the plant physiologists at University of Guelph actually came up with a very elegant experiment. They put various colored construction paper down in the middles, okay? Brown did not make it grow taller. Red did not make it grow taller. Guess what color made the corn plants grow taller? Green. So you could do the same thing with green construction paper. Okay, so obviously the plants are seeing green, okay? Sunflowers, think about sunflowers. We follow the sun, right? So what most folks don't know is that once they follow the sun to the west, what happens at night? They go back, and they go back to the east, okay? On their own, they remember what east is. They do that in various ways. And so they remember, and they're ready for the sun to come up the next day. Okay, so plants do see. Not like our eyes, but they have phytoreceptors and they do see. So that's kind of cool to me. So another indication that plants see is plants do respond to daylight. I think we all know that. But what they're really responding to is night length. Okay, so for example, cherry trees in Washington, they always bloom about April 1st. Okay, April 1st, you got about 12 hours of daytime and about 12 hours of nighttime. When do we also have 12 hours of daytime and 12 hours of nighttime? September 1st. So why do the cherry trees always bloom on April 1st and they don't bloom on September 1st? And it's because they remember the cold. They have to have the cold that precedes the 12 hours of 12 hours. So not only do they see, they remember, okay? And if you put a cherry tree and you don't give it enough cold, it won't bloom. So smelling. So obviously, we know plants have smells, right? And we love most of them, not all of them. But do plants smell? Absolutely. So I don't know if you've ever heard of a plant called dodder. Okay, a dodder is a parasitic plant. It comes out of the ground and it has to find a host. So it has to grow towards a host. How does it decide? If you put a tomato plant here and a wheat plant here, it will always grow toward the tomato plant. So they came up with a lot of really cool experiments to find out how it knows to grow to the tomato and not to the wheat plant, which it doesn't like. And basically it smelled it. So they can smell that tiny, tiny, tiny concentrations of gases. So I've asked this question a lot, and apparently you folks are really shy and you won't answer. But aspirin. I'm not suggesting that any of you would have ever taken aspirin in your life. We don't have basic names, right? But where did aspirin come from? And the answer is plants. It came from the willow tree. So the scientists at Bayer knew that American Indians used to chew on willow bark. They knew there was some compound in there, and sure enough, there's a compound in willow trees called salicylic acid. And salicylic acid is the base for acetylsalicylic acid, which is aspirin as we know it today. So my question was, and I've known that for a long time, my question was, why does a willow tree have aspirin in it? It's not for us. It wasn't so Bayer could invent synthetic aspirin. So scientists about 15 years ago started making some discoveries about why plants have these compounds in them. And let me give you an example. If a pea or bean, okay, is attacked by a bug, it happens all the time, right? We have to watch out, and sometimes we have to spray, but if a pea or bean is attacked by a bug, it's bitten, and it doesn't like it. How does it respond? It makes a gas. It makes a gas, and we didn't know this for a long time. It makes a gas, and that gas is called methyl jasmonate. Anyone got Confederate jasmine in their yard? Okay. If you got jasmine in your yard, you know exactly what methyl jasmonate smells like. It's wonderful. Okay, and it's also got some human implications. But when another plant next to that bean plant smells methyl jasmonate, it says, aha, beetles are around. I'm going to react to that. And so what does it do? It makes tannins. Tannins are bitter, right? So the beetle biting the leaf makes the leaf respond by making methyl jasmonate. Plants around it smell the methyl jasmonate and they make tannins even though they haven't been bitten yet. So scientists are a little curious. Do plants do that on purpose? Are they altruistic? You know, humans, we hope we are altruistic. We hope that we help people even though it doesn't help us, okay? Could it be that plants are altruistic? And there's a lot of fierce debate about that right now. Maybe it's just chance that that little plant next to it smelled that and protected itself against beetles. So guess what happens if that same plant is attacked by a fungus, okay? It makes another compound. It makes methyl salicylate, and that's a gas, and it gives it off, and the plants around it smell the methyl salicylate, and they make salicylate, because salicylate is a fungicide. So the leaves protect themselves with a homegrown fungicide inside. So we started figuring these things out about 15 years ago, and so now you will read and have read a lot about biologicals, okay? And I got to study I got to test biologicals for about 3 years for a couple different companies. It's a fascinating subject. How can we get plants to better cooperate with the organisms around them so that we don't have to use as much fertilizer, we don't have to use as much pesticides, that kind of thing. So plants interacting with their environment has been really stepped up lately. Okay, so feeling. Do plants feel? And no, they don't have emotions that we know of, but they can feel things. If you haven't looked at time-lapse photography of vines, and you probably grow some vines, right? Peas, beans, cucumbers can be mining. Watch some of the time-lapse videos of the way vines work, okay? Fascinating stuff. There is purpose to it. It's not random. It's not flailing around. It's actually very, very purposeful. So let's say you got a pea and it wants to find something to wind on, right? It can actually detect a piece of thread 10 times smaller than what you and I can with our fingers. Okay, so their sense of touch is incredibly delicate. Okay, so vines need to find something they can twine on, and they can find actually very small things to grow on. So that's one way they feel. Okay, Venus flytraps. I don't know if you've ever messed with Venus flytraps. They're, a lot of kids love them because they like to think about plants eating bugs, right? and they're actually native to the Carolinas. There's a lot of Venus flytraps in the Carolinas. So this gets to touch and memory. So if you're a Venus flytrap and you want to snap onto a bug, you don't want to waste your time, because I can tell you folks, it's very energy intensive for that snapping to happen. It's a lot of potassium that has to be pumped. It's pumping potassium and sodium and calcium into cells nearby, and then it releases it, and it can snap shut in about 1/10 of a second, okay? But it doesn't want to waste time. If the bug is too small, it doesn't want to close. Or if the bug touches it and then flies off, it doesn't want to close. So here's the really cool thing about Venus flytraps in a lot of plants. As long as a bug touches one of the little filaments, as long as it touches the second one within 20 minutes, it will close. If it's more than 20 minutes, it won't. So not only does it have a very keen sense of touch, it feels the bug touching it, it remembers that touch, and as long as it's in within 20 minutes, it will close. So plants absolutely have a memory, and I can explain the mechanism, but you get bored really quickly. Maybe more so than you are now. So, so they feel, and you know, I've not observed this, but some scientists were looking at the common weed cockleburr, and they just wanted to measure the leaves. They wanted to see how fast the plant grew. So that they put a ruler on it, and they measured the daily growth, and guess what they found out? When you touch those leaves, they stop growing and they start dying. And not only that, they communicate to some of the other leaves, we got a problem over here. You don't want to grow this way, we got a problem. So they communicate with themselves. Okay, so remembering, I thought this was really interesting. Some of you may know that there are two basic kinds of wheat that are grown in the world. There's spring wheat, grown in Canada, grown in North Dakota. It does not require any cold. Okay, you can plant it in May and you harvest it in October or September, and so it does not require cold. But the winter wheat that we grow in South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, all through here, requires cold. So typically we plant it in October. It sprouts, it grows into the winter, and then it experiences cold. And if it experiences enough cold, it will reproduce. It will make a seed head. But Russia had a bunch of crop failures. They grow the winter wheat. They had a bunch of crop failures, and what they figured out is a way to vernalize. That's a technical term for going through cold. They could take the wheat seed, the winter wheat seed, and freeze it. This is a seed, not a seedling that's emerged. And they could duplicate the vernalization, and it saved the Russians they were having massive famines until the scientists figured out you could freeze the wheat seed and plant it in the spring, and it did not need cold. So the point being, the wheat seed remembered that it got cold. So seed, now I worked with the seed industry for 40 years, basically off and on. So producing the highest quality seed is pretty important, right? And so having that consistency year to year is very important. So what we're finding, and this is really only in the last 5 or 6 years, that corn, cotton, and soybeans that are produced, when the seed is produced in a stressful year, somehow those genes, that becomes part of the genetic structure. The offspring of that seed, or the plant next year, will behave differently. This is really fascinating because we don't think about stress being heritable, but it is. So they can smell, they can see, they can feel. They're constantly monitoring themselves. So every plant you grow is constantly monitoring itself, and it says, have I got enough nitrogen? Have I got enough potassium? Have I got enough water? Have I got enough sugar? Okay, sugar is the building block for everything, right? It's constantly monitoring itself. And if it decides, I don't have enough, guess what? It won't yield as much. So cotton is a great example of that. Cotton is a perennial plant that we've kind of tricked into becoming an annual. So we plant it and we harvest it the same year. But cotton thinks it's got another year or 2 years or 5 years because it's a perennial. So it will put on a huge bolo. The farmer will be happy as can be. He's walking down the road and he's counting the bolls and he's doing some mapping and he's like, wow, I've got a good crop. And then it goes through stress. Cotton plant analyzes itself and says, crap, I haven't got as much as I thought I did. I think I'll just throw it off. And it does. It chunks its own fruit on the ground because it knows it can't support it. So there are some that call that banker's cotton because the farmer thought he had a really good crop and the banker wound up getting the farm. So plants monitor themselves all the time and they said, hey, have I got enough resources to do what I need to do? And if they don't, they take steps to kind of protect themselves. So the collaboration is really what I wanted to end on. So how do plants collaborate with their neighbors? And they do in a lot of ways. So there's a book called Entangled Life. By the way, I've got a list of books there. I didn't tell you that. If you want to look at that. So Entangled Life is really the story of how fungi interact with the plants around them. And folks, we've only scratched the surface. So I got a question for you. All the trees out there surrounding us, do we fertilize them? We don't, okay? We don't have to. Not like we do our farm fields and not like you do in your gardens. Why don't we have to fertilize all those trees? Because they have associations with mycorrhizae, bacteria, and other fungi, and they let those mycorrhizae do the work for them. It's really cool associations. It's estimated, and this is really only in the last 5 or 6 years that scientists have started to figure this out. It's estimated that 70% of the phosphorus that a plant takes up is actually given to it by the mycorrhizae fungi. And that's huge. Okay, that's huge because for over 150 years, we didn't worry about mycorrhizae fungi, and we basically laid the soil bare every year once the plow was invented, and so we didn't worry about that, and so we reduced the amount of mycorrhizae in our soil. So we're finally figuring out, hey, the soil is not just a chemistry stuff. It's a living biological thing. So I think there's going to be some really cool things coming out in the next 5 to 10 years. Glenn and I were talking. That's the number one question I think Extension is getting is how do biologicals fit in? The truth is we've got a lot of biologicals in our soil already. We just need to help them along. And could we add some? Certainly. And that's what a lot of companies are trying to do. So there's a lot of collaboration. And, one of the most fascinating accounts in the book Entangled Life is, and you've probably heard some of this, the largest organism in the world is not the blue whale. It's a mycorrhizae fungi that are underneath the roots of some forest in the north. One organism, hundreds of acres, okay? What wasn't known is that mycorrhizae network acts like a conductor, okay? It will actually take sugar from a healthy tree, move it to an unhealthy tree. It's amazing, okay? We have to start looking at it from the fungus's point of view and not the plant's point of view, which is typically what we've done. And it's really cool. And if there's a sick tree in the forest, the mycorrhizae will actually try to fix it. It will create compounds that act like fungicides, compounds that are going to protect that tree. So, folks, we've only scratched the surface. Mycorrhizae are going to be the next frontier of agriculture. I'm convinced of that. And how to better harness all that is going to be really fun. So, That's what I had. So my wife just pointed out, one of the other tools I use is a moisture meter. You know,
It's a huge thing.
there's a lot of them on the market. This one I use is about $100, okay? Worth every penny. Because a question for you, and I ask this of farmers all the time, and farmers usually get it right because they see it in their fields. Worldwide, do we lose more yield, whether that be yield of tomatoes, avocados, asparagus, corn, soybeans, whatever, do we lose more yield to drought or to flood? Flood by 3 to 1. Okay, so one of the things I've gotten to do over the years is work with farmers to try to minimize stress. One of the biggest stressors is too much water. So having a little moisture meter has been really, really helpful in when to water our magnolia trees in our yard. And particularly when not to water the magnolia trees in our yard. So yeah, thanks, Lori. That's one of the tools that's in my toolbox at all times, is a moisture meter and a thermometer. So, Glenn, anything to add, or Brother Glenn?
Any questions, anybody?